Mallorie thought she was preparing for a marriage. Rasit may have been preparing for the possibility that the marriage would fail. And that is exactly why one piece of paperwork completely blows this relationship apart. Mallorie is staring at Rasit's name attached to a financial arrangement potentially worth $500,000. There are references to property, future security, and conditions she knows nothing about. But the number is not what scares her most. The dates are. Some of these conversations appear to have started while Rasit was still talking to her about commitment, marriage, and building one future together. Then she confronts him. And Rasit makes possibly the worst mistake he could make. He does not say, "What are you talking about?" He does not look shocked. He asks, "Where did you find that?" That one reaction changes everything. Because now Mallorie knows this is not some random paperwork Rasit forgot existed. He knows exactly what she found. Minutes later, she tells him to pack his things. But here is where this gets complicated. Rasit insists Mallorie has misunderstood what the $500,000 actually represents. And eventually, we learn that he may be right about that part. The problem is that his explanation creates an even bigger question. If this arrangement was innocent, why did he hide it? And by the time his family gets dragged into the story, Mallorie is no longer asking whether Rasit kept one financial secret. She is asking whether everybody around Rasit knew there was a backup plan for this relationship except her. Because this fight did not really begin with $500,000. It began when both of them started behaving like betrayal was coming before either one had actually betrayed the other. A few days before Mallorie finds those papers, the warning signs are small. Rasit becomes more protective of his phone. Certain calls happen away from Mallorie. Money conversations suddenly feel uncomfortable. Then, he starts asking very specific questions about accounts, property, ownership, and what would happen financially after marriage. None of those questions are automatically suspicious. In fact, people absolutely should discuss finances before getting married. Money is one of those subjects couples love avoiding while everything feels romantic, and then everybody acts shocked when those differences become massive later. So the problem is not that Rasit is thinking about money. The problem is how he is thinking about it. Mallorie starts getting the feeling that he is not asking, "What are we going to build together?" He seems more focused on, "Where will I stand if something goes wrong?" And those are very different conversations. One is about partnership. The other is about protection. Now, protection itself is not a red flag. Nobody should enter a marriage believing love means giving up every bit of independence. But if your partner starts quietly preparing for the possibility of your relationship collapsing while publicly talking about how strong the relationship is, you are eventually going to ask why those two versions of the future look so different. Mallorie does not immediately accuse Rasit of using her. That matters. She tries to tell herself she may be overthinking this. And there is a real danger in relationships when suspicion becomes the default setting. Once somebody believes their partner is hiding something, normal behavior starts looking suspicious. A phone turned over becomes suspicious. A slow answer becomes suspicious. A private family conversation becomes suspicious. Eventually, you are no longer reacting to what your partner actually did. You are reacting to what you fear they might be doing. But Rasit keeps feeding that fear. When Mallorie questions him, he gives her this vague explanation about preparing for their future. And that should make her feel better. Instead, it creates another problem. Because what kind of future are you preparing for if the person you are supposedly building it with knows nothing about the plan? That is the emotional contradiction sitting underneath this entire story. Mallorie seems to need transparency before she can feel secure. Rasit seems to need security before he feels safe enough to be transparent. So Mallorie pushes harder. Rasit protects himself more. His protection looks like secrecy to Mallorie. Her questions feel like accusations to Rasit, and they keep feeding the exact behavior they hate in each other. Then Mallorie finds the documents. Rasit's name is there. The arrangement is there. And then she sees that number. $500,000. At first, even Mallorie cannot fully explain what she is looking at. The paperwork seems to describe some kind of future business or property opportunity. There are conditions attached. It does not look like Rasit simply received $500,000 and hid the cash somewhere. But Mallorie immediately understands one thing. Rasit knew. She did not. That becomes the real issue. She starts looking at dates and putting pieces together. Suddenly, those strange calls seem different. Those questions about property seem different. The defensiveness around money seems different. And this is one of the most damaging things secrecy does to a relationship. It rewrites the past. Once you discover something significant was hidden from you, you start replaying old moments looking for clues. Was that phone call about this? Was that argument really about this? Did he already know then? Was I the only person in the room who did not understand what was happening? And whether every suspicion is accurate almost becomes secondary. The trust damage has already changed the meaning of those memories. Mallorie photographs the documents before confronting Rasit. Then she asks about the money. And we get that response. Where did you find that? If you are Rasit, that is almost the worst possible opening. Because Mallorie is not hearing confusion. She is hearing recognition. He knew those documents existed. He knew what they were about. And now his job is no longer explaining some paperwork Mallorie misunderstood. His job is explaining why something important enough to make him panic was apparently not important enough to tell his future wife. Rasit immediately tries to separate the truth from Mallorie's worst assumption. He says this is not 500,000 sitting in a secret bank account. He did not take money from her.
He did not steal anything.
He did not quietly receive a giant payment. According to him, this is a potential long-term opportunity connected to people close to him. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing has fully happened yet. And this is where Rasit finally gets a reasonable argument. If no money has actually changed hands, and this involves his own future financial position, does Mallorie automatically have a right to know every detail before anything is finalized? Some viewers in a fictional debate like this would probably say no. They would argue that marriage does not mean one person loses every boundary or every piece of personal financial independence. And that argument deserves to be heard. But Mallorie's problem is not simply, you had something that belonged to you. Her problem is, you are making decisions about what happens to you if we fail, and somehow I was never part of that conversation. That is different. Rasit can win the technical argument and still lose the relationship argument. You can say, I never lied. But if the only reason that is technically true is because your partner never asked the exact question you were hoping they would not ask, you still have a transparency problem. Mallorie wants to know why she had to discover this instead of hearing it directly from him. And that is when Rasit turns the accusation back toward her. He says Mallorie constantly questions his motives. From his perspective, money never stays money. Every financial question eventually becomes, are you using me? Every attempt to create independence becomes, are you planning to leave? Every disagreement becomes proof that his intentions are questionable. And if that is genuinely how Rasit has experienced this relationship, then his frustration makes sense. Nobody wants to spend a marriage trying to prove they are not some villain their partner already expects them to become. But here is where Rasit completely undercuts his own position. If you already know Mallorie struggles with trust, secretly creating a six-figure financial safety plan is probably not the move that convinces her to trust you more. You cannot fix suspicion by creating more things to discover. Rasit says Mallorie never trusted him. Mallorie says she cannot trust somebody who keeps important things from her. And now they are trapped. Neither one thinks they created the problem. Each person thinks their behavior is simply a reaction to the other person. Then Mallorie asks the question that strips away all the financial language. Were you ever going to tell me? Rasit pauses. And sometimes a pause is louder than an answer. Because Mallorie does not need to hear a confession. She sees hesitation. Then Rasit finally admits something much more important than the actual dollar amount. Part of this arrangement was meant to give him financial security if the relationship failed. That changes the entire fight. Because now Mallorie is not looking at a mysterious investment. She is looking at Rasit's exit strategy. At least that is how she sees it. From Rasit's point of view, this is protection. He has changed his life. He has made sacrifices. He does not want his entire financial future tied to another person. If the marriage collapses, he wants to know he will not be left with nothing. And on its own, that is not unreasonable. People sign prenups every day. People maintain separate savings. People protect property. People plan for worst-case scenarios while still hoping those scenarios never happen. Preparing for divorce does not automatically mean you want a divorce. But there is one thing healthy financial planning usually requires. A conversation. If Rasit had told Mallorie, I love you, but I need to know that I will have financial security if something happens between us, that might have been uncomfortable. Mallorie might have hated it. They might have fought. But at least they would have been fighting about the truth. Instead, Mallorie caught the truth. And being told something feels completely different from discovering something. Mallorie now sees their timelines in two totally different ways. While she was preparing to marry Rasit, Rasit was apparently preparing to survive losing her. That does not prove he wanted the relationship to fail. But emotionally, it can absolutely feel like somebody walked into the marriage with one foot already outside the door. Mallorie asks him whether he thought they were going to break up. He says no. So she asks the question he cannot easily answer. Then, why did you need protection potentially worth $500,000 if you believed this marriage was going to work? And that is where the argument stops being about numbers. It becomes about their completely different definitions of trust. Mallorie seems to believe trust means, if it affects our future, you tell me. Rasit seems to believe trust means, you should believe I love you even if I maintain something that protects me personally. Both ideas can exist in a healthy relationship. The problem is that Mallorie and Rasit apparently never agreed on where the line was. Then one more detail comes out. Rasit's family knew. At least some of them apparently knew about part of this arrangement before Mallorie did. And now the emotional stakes jump again. Because this is no longer simply financial secrecy. For Mallorie, it becomes humiliation. Imagine believing you are becoming part of a family while discovering that members of that same family knew about a plan designed to protect Rasit if your marriage collapsed. Mallorie is going to wonder what those people were thinking every time they smiled at her. Did they believe in this marriage? Were they expecting it to fail? Were they protecting Rasit from her? And most importantly, why did they know something about her future marriage that she did not? Rasit insists his family was not plotting against Mallorie. He says they were worried about him becoming financially vulnerable. And that is another point where the audience could divide. Some fans might feel that Rasit's family had every right to worry about him. If he was entering a situation where Mallorie might hold more financial power, wanting him to have his own safety net could look like basic family protection. But another section of viewers would probably see something much darker. They may say the moment family members start helping one partner secretly prepare for the relationship to fail, those relatives are no longer simply supporting the relationship. They are participating in the distrust. And that is where this stops being Mallorie versus Rasit. It becomes Mallorie versus a system she believes Rasit created with his family. Now, every old disagreement returns. Who sacrifices more? Whose family gets too much influence? Who makes the final decisions? Where will they live? Who controls the finances? If Rasit and Mallorie disagree, does Rasit discuss that problem with Mallorie first, or does his family hear about it before she does? Those questions matter more than the $500,000. The money is simply the thing that forces all of them into the open. Mallorie wants to feel like Rasit's partner. Rasit wants to know that becoming Mallorie's partner does not mean becoming financially powerless. Those needs are not automatically incompatible, but secrecy makes them look incompatible. And if this fictional storyline aired, I think the most interesting audience reaction would come from viewers who refuse to choose one side. Some would absolutely say Mallorie should kick him out. A possible $500,000 plan connected to the failure of your future marriage is not something you casually forget to mention. Others would say Mallorie's reaction proves why Rasit felt he needed protection in the first place. But there would probably be a third group saying the most obvious thing. These two should not be getting married yet. Because if you cannot discuss the possibility of financial independence without one person hiding and the other person investigating, the marriage certificate is not going to solve that. Then Mallorie asks Rasit another brutal question. Would you still marry me if this $500,000 opportunity disappeared tomorrow? Rasit gets frustrated. He tells her she is turning everything into a test. Mallorie does not back down. In her mind, Rasit already turned their relationship into a calculation. That is when she says it. Pack your things. At first, Rasit appears to think this is just another angry threat. People say dramatic things during relationship fights all the time. Leave. We're finished. I'm done. And then 20 minutes later, nobody has gone anywhere. But Mallorie means it. Rasit starts packing. And strangely, that is when the fight becomes more emotional. Not when they are yelling. When they stop. Because anger still suggests both people believe there is something worth fighting about. A suitcase changes the meaning. Now somebody might actually leave. Rasit tells Mallorie she is destroying the relationship because she chose the worst possible interpretation of everything he did. Mallorie tells him this is not about the $500,000. She is kicking him out because he planned for a future without her while expecting her to trust him with hers. That line gets to the center of her position better than any argument about money. Then Rasit finally reveals the detail that could have made this entire story look very different. The $500,000 was never guaranteed cash. It was the potential future value of a business or a property arrangement that would only happen if certain conditions were met. So Mallorie's initial interpretation was wrong. There was no secret pile of $500,000. There may never even be $500,000. For 1 second, Rasit finally seems to have something that could shift the entire argument back in his favor. Until Mallory asks one question. Then why hide it? And Rasit says he knew she would react exactly like this. That answer hurts his defense more than he realizes. Because if he knew Mallory would care, then he knew this information mattered inside their relationship. He did not keep quiet because it was irrelevant. He kept quiet because telling her would create a conflict he did not want to face. That is not the same thing as lying about money. But it is still avoiding the truth because the truth is inconvenient. And uncomfortable conversations do not disappear because you delay them. They collect interest. Now both sides have helped create the same toxic loop. Rasit hides information because he believes Mallory will distrust him. Mallory distrusts him because he hides information. He says, "I did not tell you because you always assume the worst." She says, "I assume the worst because I keep discovering things you never told me." That cycle can survive one fight. It can even survive several. But over time, it becomes the relationship. Rasit finally closes the suitcase and walks toward the door. Before leaving, he tells Mallory, "You wanted proof that I was planning to leave you. Now you're the one making me leave." And that is such a loaded statement because both people could hear it and believe they are the victim. Rasit sees himself as somebody being punished for trying to protect his future. Mallory sees herself as somebody finally protecting herself after realizing Rasit did not trust her enough to be honest. Neither believes they started this. Neither believes they should be the one apologizing first. Rasit leaves. Mallory lets him. And if the story ended there, viewers could spend the entire week arguing about who was right. But then Mallory looks at the paperwork again. And she notices something she missed during the confrontation. Another name. Someone connected to Rasit appears to have signed or approved part of the arrangement. That changes the next chapter completely. Because there is a major difference between Rasit telling his family, "I have this opportunity," and his family actively helping create the structure behind that opportunity. If they were deeply involved, Mallory now has to ask whether this backup plan truly belonged to Rasit, or whether people around him had been quietly preparing him for the possibility that his marriage to Mallory would fail. But there is another possibility that may be even harder for Mallory to accept. What if Rasit's family was not trying to destroy the relationship? What if they simply saw how unstable the trust already was? Maybe the 500,000 arrangement did not create the cracks. And that is why the biggest issue is no longer the 500,000. It is not even whether Mallory was right to kick Rasit out. The real question is whether a marriage can survive when one person prepares for betrayal and the other person expects betrayal, and both use the other person's behavior as proof that their fear was justified. So, who crossed the bigger line here? Rasit for hiding a financial safety plan tied to the possibility that their relationship might fail? Or Mallory for immediately throwing him out before they could fully work through what the arrangement actually meant?